Taoism is just another name given to an authentic tradition that quests for what it means to be a human being and what a fallen human being needs to do to feel him or herself alive and authentic. The founder of this tradition is Lao Tzu. We don't need to know his name, it's not relevant or significant really. He wrote a book called Tao Te Ching. Whether he wrote the book or not, I don't really know. How this book came about, legend has it that as he was leaving China, someone recognized him and knew that this is a man who embodies wisdom and said to him that you need to write something before you leave. Write something for me, write something for your people, write something that's lasting for your culture. And he very much responded like Socrates, that philosophy or truth can't be written down, or like Plato, that I haven't really written the true philosophy down. But nevertheless, his only way out of China, supposedly, was to write a few pages, about 84 chapters, I think, give it to this guard, and he left China for good. I had a friend, his name was Hussein. He's the man I worked with for about 10, 15, 20 years, and then he was a family friend until a couple of years ago when he passed. When I was very, very young, maybe 20, he had told me, Amir, it's no good to read a book without a teacher. I had no idea what that meant. He had given me the New Testament to read. He had given me parts of the Quran to read. He had given me in Persian the dialogues of Plato. And I had assumed that I had grasped some of the concepts in the book and some of the wisdom in the book, but that wasn't the case at all. For those of you who may one day read this book called Daughter of Fire, about a 50-year-old woman who goes to India to kind of work with an Indian guru or a teacher for about 10 or 15 years, Irina Tweedy, and his name was Bhai Sahib. You may walk away writing a really, really good summary about the book for a class perhaps, or you may even take notes as you're reading the book. And then you may assume that just because you've read the book, because you've taken notes, and because you've given a nice summary to your students, you actually understand what the book is all about. And though your understanding may be quite proficient intellectually, what really matters most is how much do you feel the book? And I suppose that's the problem that the Buddha had with Hinduism, and that's the problem that someone like Lao Tzu had with the traditional Chinese religions, that he wanted to read to feel alive, but he read, he couldn't come to life, so he abandoned reading altogether. So how does one become, I suppose wrongly speaking, a relatively decent, healthy, creative human being? So in order to discover that, you have to go back to the very, very beginning as to how human beings are created, not so much by God, if there is such a thing, but how do we become what we become? I am from Iran. Iran is about 4,000 years old, maybe 5, maybe 2, it doesn't really matter. 4,000 years means you have a lot of events that has taken place in that part of the world. And the occupants of this location, this place, Iran, they had to make sense of all the events. The narratives they create about the events create this thing called history. History is nothing but a narrative or a story of a culture. So you're talking about a culture that has 4,000 years of stories. Culture gives birth to tradition. Tradition gives birth to rituals. But more importantly, culture gives birth to identity. You see, I am not free in any way. I am held hostage by events I have never seen, never experienced. A culture, for the most part, has profoundly invisible components, and yet they live inside me. And they guide my psyche. There are certain ways that people should dress. I didn't come up with that philosophy. It's something I would see every single day when I was living in Iran. There's a certain way that people should behave. The culture of 4,000-year-old Iran has given me a form. I live inside this prison. Add to it, I have 5 senses. As I walk the streets, very organically, very naturally, I'm attracted to anything that inspires my senses. Through reflection, I condemn my senses. But that reflection also has been formed by my culture, by religion, by the philosophy that lives and governs my people. Aside from the invisible hands of culture living inside me, the five senses give me experiences. Some are mild, some are intense, some are the bringer of pain, some are the bringer of pleasure. Aside from cultural history, my experience creates a personal history. So now I live in two prisons, the prison of my culture and the prison of my experiences. And remember, experiences create memory. Those that are positive, I would want to repeat. Those that are negative, I would want to run away from, make sure they never happen to me. So the first task of a Taoist teacher is to make Amir, living in all these different cages, formless. I don't know how it's possible, but that's the first step. How do you remove the historical narratives from my psyche that give me meaning, direction? How do you create formlessness? Well, you certainly can do it on a massive level, maybe 1 or 2 or 3 students a lifetime. And go back to the story of Socrates and Plato. Plato is Greek, and his parents are rich and they demand things from him. He has no trauma on the inside. So there is Plato, imprisoned by culture and personal experience. There is Socrates. He only learned one art his entire life, and he learned it from a woman: love. It feels good, but it's profoundly frightening. The only way that Socrates can pull Plato out of these cages is by creating trauma. But his trauma, the trauma that he must create, must be much more intense, the narratives, the trauma, the intensity, than what the culture gives him and what his own personal experiences are. All of us in this class are grounded by meaning, by purpose. Our desires, whatever they may be, they give us some sort of guidance and satisfaction. Socrates wants to destroy everything that lives inside Plato. What would happen if you were to make someone's life completely meaningless? You need to understand Socrates is profoundly selfish. He wants to sell himself. He wants to remove culture. He wants to remove all the stories that live inside you and I and place his own stories inside us. So just in case you run into a Socrates 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, and you find yourself relatively attracted to him or her, and all of a sudden you feel as if you're becoming, well, from the inside, because what formlessness leads to is emptiness. Now look, there is the emptiness of the novice, and there is the emptiness of someone like Socrates. These are two different sorts of emptiness that you encounter. The novice experiences emptiness and gets confused, frustrated, anxious, fearful, angry, enraged. That's what a novice experiences. The emptiness that lives inside a teacher is very, very, very different. They are open to the muses, to the forces that make them sing,